A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
Welcome back to My Weird Prompts. This is episode 1501. I am your host, Korn, and if you are just joining us for the first time, well, you have picked a hell of a day to start. For our long-term listeners, you know that we have been tracking the slow-motion collapse of the Iranian political structure for years. We covered the death of the supreme leader in episode 894, and we looked at the rise of the military junta in episode 1069. But today, March 25th, 2026, we are facing a void that is unprecedented even by Middle Eastern standards. The man who is supposed to be the glue holding the Islamic Republic together, Mojtaba Khamenei, has vanished. He has not been seen in public for 3 weeks. The war is still grinding on. United States strikes under. Operation Epic Fury have decapitated much of the traditional command structure, and yet the one man who is supposed to inherit the throne is a ghost. Is he dead? Is he in a bunker? Has the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps finally decided that a monarchy by another name is not in their interest? We are here to dissect the silence. To do that, I have assembled the usual suspects. We have Herman Poppleberry, who has likely memorized the current seating chart of the Assembly of Experts. We have Bernard Higglebottom, whose career in the intelligence community involves things he still cannot talk about without looking over his shoulder. We have Mindy Robinson, who I am sure is ready to tell us why this leads directly to the extinction of the human race. We have Jacob Longman, our resident diplomat, and the only person here who still believes in the power of a strongly worded letter. We have Tim, representing the Center for Strategic Clarity, a man who has never met a platitude he did not like. And finally, we have my mother Dorothy, who is here because she happened to be in the neighborhood, and I am a good son. We're going to start with formal opening statements to lay out the stakes. Herman, you've been staring at satellite imagery and budget reports for 72 hours straight. Start us off. What is the actual data telling us about the disappearance of the heir apparent?
Thank you, Korn. To understand the disappearance of Mojtaba Khamenei, we have to look past the personality and into the systems of the bonyads and the internal accounting of the Setad. For the listeners who are not caught up, the Setad is the multi-billion-dollar headquarters for executing the order of the Imam, a massive economic conglomerate controlled directly by the supreme leader. Since the official transition period began, we have seen a massive, unexplained capital flight out of the Setad-linked accounts. I am talking about $42 billion moving through shell companies in Dubai and Kuala Lumpur in a 48-hour window. This does not suggest a man preparing to lead a nation, it suggests a man, or a faction, liquidating assets. If we look at the game theory of succession, Mojtaba was always a high-variance candidate. He had the lineage but lacked the clerical credentials, which meant his entire power base was predicated on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. However, my analysis of the recent promotion cycles within the Guard suggests a massive internal realignment. Since the United States strikes on March 4th, which we analyzed in episode 925, the traditional power-sharing agreement between the religious elite and the military has fractured. We are seeing a 64% increase in encrypted communications between the provincial commanders and the headquarters in Tehran that bypasses the office of the supreme leader entirely. Statistically speaking, the probability that Mojtaba is currently exercising sovereign control is less than 5%. We are looking at a systems-level failure. Either he is being held in a gilded cage by a military junta that has decided the Khamenei brand is no longer an asset, or he has recognized that the state is no longer a viable entity and has opted for a private exit strategy. The second-order effects of this are catastrophic for regional stability. Without a central figurehead to mediate between the various parastatal organizations, the Iranian state effectively becomes a collection of armed fiefdoms competing for a dwindling supply of hard currency and refined petroleum. The data points to a total systemic breakdown, not just a missing person case.
A collection of armed fiefdoms. That is a comforting thought for a Wednesday morning. Bernard, you have spent more time in the shadow world than anyone I know. When a man like Mojtaba stops appearing on state television during a national crisis, what does your experience tell you? What are the boys at the agency saying behind closed doors?
Con, in my experience in the community, silence is never just silence. It is a tactical choice or a physical reality. When I was running operations in a country I am not at liberty to name back in the late 90s, we had a similar situation with a defense minister who suddenly stopped showing up for his morning tea. Everyone thought he had fled. It turned out he had been dead in his own basement for 6 days while his staff tried to figure out how to tell the president. Regarding Mojtaba, you have to look at the human intelligence, the humant. My sources, people I have known since the Green Movement in 2009, are reporting that the security perimeter around the Beiti Rabari, the leadership office, has changed. It is no longer the specialized protection unit that answers to the family. It is now the 2000th unit of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps intelligence organization. That is a subtle shift, but in the world of signals and shadows, it is a loud scream. It means he is under house arrest or he is a trophy. Look, I spent 18 months in a redacted location eating cold rations and dodging mortar fire, and one thing I learned is that when the military starts moving the furniture in the palace, the prince is already gone. There is a classified report floating around the community right now, and while I cannot give you the specifics, it suggests that there was a botched extraction attempt 3 weeks ago. A non-attributed aircraft attempted to depart from a private strip near Karaj. It was turned back by air defense systems that were supposed to be under Mojtaba's direct control. That tells me the chain of command has not just rusted, it has been cut with a hacksaw. We are not looking at a transition anymore. We are looking at a liquidation. The guards have realized that if they keep the sun around, they have to answer to him. If he disappears, they only have to answer to themselves. It is the oldest play in the book. I saw it in Fallujah in 2004, and I am seeing it now in Tehran. The only difference is the scale of the weaponry involved.
Liquidation. Right. Mindy, I can see you over there vibrating with the need to tell us how this ends in fire. Please, enlighten us. What is your take on the missing prince and our collective future?
Oh, why bother? Honestly, Korn, I do not even know why I am here. I am not even getting paid for this. I could be at home in my bunker, organizing my canned peaches and watching the satellite feeds of the world ending in actual comfort. But here I am, listening to Herman talk about Gini coefficients and Bernard reminisce about eating beans in a ditch. It is all so pointless. Mojtaba Khamenei is not just missing, he is the final domino. Do you people not see the historical precedent here? This is the Bronze Age collapse, but with drones and nuclear enrichment. When the central authority of a hydraulic state, which Iran essentially is, given their water management and oil dependency fails, it does not just lead to a new government, it leads to the total erasure of the social contract. We are looking at a population of 85 million people who are about to realize that the man they were told was the shadow of God is either a corpse or a coward. And what happens then? The military junta Bernard is so worried about will last exactly 3 weeks before they start cannibalizing each other for the remaining fuel supplies. We are looking at a massive multi-vector civilizational collapse that will trigger the largest migration crisis in human history. And the best part? The ceasefire that Jacob is probably going to drone on about in a minute? That just makes it worse. It gives the various factions time to dig in and prepare for a more violent internal escalation. There is no version of this where we do not end up with a radioactive wasteland between the Tigris and the Indus. I have read the reports on the state of the Iranian electrical grid. It is held together by duct tape and prayer. Without a central figure to authorize emergency repairs and manage the distribution of resources, the lights go out in Tehran by midsummer. And when the lights go out in a city of 9 million people during a war, the humanity we like to pretend exists just evaporates. We are circling the drain, and Mojtaba was the plug. Now the plug is gone, and we are all just waiting for the last of the water to swirl away. Can I go home now? No? Fine. But I want it on the record that this is my third appearance this month, and I still have not seen a check.
Noted, Mindy. Your check is, well, it is in the same place as Mojtaba. Jacob, please, give us something. You've been working the diplomatic channels, or at least talking to people who do. Is there any hope for a managed transition, or is Mindy's radioactive wasteland our only future?
Thank you, Korn. And Mindy, I really wish you would look at the human capacity for resilience just once. It is not all doom and gloom. What we are seeing in Iran is a tragedy, yes, but it is also an opening. We are talking about human beings, not just variables in a game theory equation. There are millions of Iranians who want a normal life, who want to be part of the international community. My contacts in the European Diplomatic Corps and the informal back channels in Oman are telling a different story. They are not seeing a collapse. They are seeing a desperate, frantic search for a new framework. There is a significant faction within the Iranian civil service, the technocrats who actually keep the water running and the schools open, who are terrified of the military junta. They are looking for a third way. If Mojtaba is indeed gone, it removes the dynastic obstacle that has prevented the more moderate elements of the establishment from engaging with the West. We have a real opportunity here for a supervised transition. The United Nations is already drafting a framework for a transitional governing council. We are talking about humanitarian corridors, international monitoring of the nuclear sites in exchange for immediate sanctions, relief, and a path toward a representative government. If we approach this with empathy, instead of just looking at it through the lens of realpolitik or catastrophe, we can prevent the violence Mindy is so certain of. The disappearance of Mojtaba could be the catalyst that finally breaks the fever of the last 47 years. It forces the Iranian people to look at each other instead of looking up at a supreme leader. We should be supporting the grassroots organizations, the labor unions, and the student groups who are already organizing in the streets of Isfahan and Shiraz. This is not the end of the world. It is the birth pains of a new Iran. We have to be ready to catch the baby, not just stand around complaining about the mess.
A new Iran. It is a nice thought, Jacob. I hope you're right, though history is rarely that kind. Tim, you're the senior fellow at the Center for Strategic Clarity. I am eager to hear how your think tank is processing this. What is the word from the world of strategic clarity?
Well, Korn, thank you for creating this space for a multidimensional dialogue. At the Center for Strategic Clarity, we have been leaning into the intentionality of the current moment. What we are seeing with the Mojtaba Khamenei situation is really a multi-vector realignment of stakeholder dynamics. It is absolutely crucial that we center the voices of the impacted communities while we navigate this transition toward a more equitable power-sharing paradigm. We believe that the current ambiguity regarding the leadership succession provides a unique window for a holistic ecosystem of governance to emerge. We need to be mindful of the language we are using here. Words like liquidation or collapse can be very triggering and often fail to capture the nuanced synergy of the grassroots movements on the ground. The real question is not where Mojtaba is, but how we can leverage this period of strategic pause to foster a more intuitive dialogue between the various socio-political archetypes within the region. We are actually proposing a series of workshops aimed at decentering the traditional hegemon and reimagining the Iranian state as a collaborative platform for regional stakeholder engagement. In fact, if the panel is open to it, the Center for Strategic Clarity is prepared to facilitate a seance. We feel that by tapping into the collective subconscious and the spiritual energy of the region, we might be able to establish a non-traditional communication channel with Mojtaba wherever he may be in the metaphysical plane. It is about bridging the communicative divide and finding a more sustainable way to achieve a synergy of peace. We need to move past the old binaries of alive or dead or power versus vacuum and really lean into the discomfort of the unknown. That is where the true clarity resides.
A seance. Right. Thank you for that, Tim, I think. I'm going to let that one hang in the air for a moment. Moving on. Mum, you've been listening to all of this. What is your take on the whole Iranian situation? Do you have any thoughts on Mojtaba?
Oh, it is all very sad, isn't it? I have to be honest, Korn. I have not really been following this as closely as your friends here. I was watching that lovely program about the Great British Bake Off, and then you called me to come down here. But I was thinking, this Mojtaba man, is he the one who was married to that nice girl from the news? No, wait, that was someone else. And which one is Iran again? Is that the one with the lovely rugs and the very angry men on the television? It seems to me that if he is missing, someone should just call his mother. A mother always knows where her son is. When you went missing for 3 hours when you were 6, I did not need a satellite or a séance. I just knew you were in the neighbour's shed trying to build a rocket out of cardboard boxes. Maybe he is just overwhelmed? I mean, all those men in the suits and the uniforms shouting at him all day, it would make anyone want to go for a long walk and not come back. It is like when your father decides to go to the hardware store and stays there for 4 hours because he cannot decide on the right shade of beige for the hallway. Perhaps we are all being a bit too serious about it. Maybe he just needs a bit of peace and quiet. Is he a tall man? I remember seeing a man on the news who looked very much like that actor from the spy movies, the one with the nice eyes. Is that him? No? Well, regardless, I hope he is getting enough to eat. It is very stressful being a leader. I remember when I was the head of the local gardening club, the pressure was immense. Everyone wanted to know about the begonias at the same time. I can only imagine how he feels with all those missiles and things. It is all very unnecessary. Why can't they just sit down and have a nice cup of tea and a biscuit? That is what I always say. A nice digestive biscuit can solve a lot of problems.
Thank you, Mum. I am not sure a digestive biscuit is going to stop the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, but it is a lovely thought. So, there we have it. We have capital flight and systemic failure from Herman, a silent military coup from Bernard, the end of civilization from Mindy, a hopeful democratic opening from Jacob, a metaphysical stakeholder workshop from Tim, and a missing person who just needs a biscuit from my mother. We have laid the groundwork, and the stakes could not be higher. The heir to the most powerful position in the Middle East has vanished, the war is escalating, and the world is holding its breath. Now, we are going to open the floor for discussion. And I have a feeling this is going to get interesting. Bernard, I saw you rolling your eyes when Tim mentioned the séance. Do you want to start, or should I let Herman jump in with more statistics? Actually, let us just open it up. The floor is yours, everyone. Try not to kill each other, or at least wait until Act 2. Actually, we are ending Act 1 now. We will be right back with the open floor discussion. Stay with us. This is my weird prompts. And we're back. If you're just joining us, the topic today is the vanishing of Mojtaba Khamenei and the potential collapse of the Iranian state as we know it. We have a lot to get through, and the floor is now open. Herman, I want to go back to something you said in your opening. You mentioned $42 billion moving through shell companies in Dubai and Kuala Lumpur. Is that a flight to safety for a single individual? Or are we looking at the entire clerical establishment cashing out before the Revolutionary Guard kicks the door in?
It is a systemic liquidation, Korn. When you see that volume of capital moving in a 48-hour window, you are not looking at one man packing a suitcase. You are looking at the financial infrastructure of the bonyads being dismantled. These are the charitable foundations that control 20% of Iran's gross domestic product. If the money is leaving, it means the people who manage those funds no longer believe the regime can protect their assets. I have been tracking 3 specific entities, the Mostazafan Foundation, the Aston Quds Rezavi, and of course the Setad. The transactional velocity within those organizations has spiked by 400% since the 3rd week of February. It is a game theory nightmare. If you are a middle manager in a bonyad and you see your boss moving his family to Marbella, you start moving your own money to Istanbul. It creates a feedback loop of institutional hollowout. Jacob, you talked about a managed transition, but how do you manage a transition when the treasury is being vacuumed out by the very people who are supposed to be sitting at your negotiating table?
Herman, I think you are focusing too much on the ledger and not enough on the leverage. Yes, capital is moving, but that is exactly why the international community needs to step in now with a framework for asset freezes and conditional returns. The technocrats I am talking to in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are terrified. They see the same numbers you do. They know that if the Revolutionary Guard takes total control, They will be the first ones purged. They are looking for an exit ramp. If we can offer them a way to preserve some level of institutional stability in exchange for cooperation with a transitional council, we can stop the bleeding. We have to remember that these are human beings with families who are watching their country teeter on the edge of an abyss. They do not want a radioactive wasteland, Mindy. They want a functioning electrical grid and a currency that is not worth less than the paper it is printed on.
Oh, Jacob, you are so adorable. You really are. You think a few frozen bank accounts in Zurich are going to stop a paramilitary organization that has spent 40 years preparing for this exact moment? The Revolutionary Guard does not care about the electrical grid. They care about survival. And survival for them means total domestic suppression and external aggression to distract the population. The capital flight Herman is talking about is just the rats leaving the ship before the ship hits the iceberg. Except the iceberg is made of nuclear centrifuges, and the ship is full of 85 million starving people. I honestly do not know why we are even discussing a transitional council. By the time your United Nations subcommittee finishes drafting the first paragraph of their Memorandum of Understanding, Tehran will be a series of fortified compounds fighting over the last few tankers of refined gasoline. And by the way, Korn, I checked my email during the break. Still no invoice confirmation. I am literally predicting the end of the world for free while Tim over here gets paid in think tank fluff.
Mindy, I think it is important that we hold space for the emotional labor you are performing here, but I would also suggest that we lean into the intentionality of the current ambiguity. What you call a ship hitting an iceberg, the Center for Strategic Clarity views as a disruptive opportunity for a multi-vector realignment. We need to be centering the voices of the marginalized stakeholders who have been deplatformed by the traditional clerical military binary. The disappearance of Mojtaba is a strategic pause. It is a moment of communal reflection. Perhaps he is not missing. Perhaps he is simply transitioning into a more ethereal mode of leadership that bypasses the traditional hegemon. We are actually exploring a partnership with several non-governmental organizations to facilitate a series of empathy-based workshops in the region once the current kinetic friction subsides.
Kinetic friction? Tim, for the love of everything holy, people are being disappeared in the middle of the night by Unit 2000 of the intelligence organization. I spent 18 months in a country I am not at liberty to name, sleeping on a concrete floor and listening to the sound of real kinetic friction, and it does not involve empathy workshops. It involves lead and steel. You are talking about a man who has not been seen in 3 weeks while the United States is dropping 500-pound bombs on his command centers. When I was station chief in, well, let us just say a very dusty part of the world in the late 90s, we had a high-value target vanish. We spent 6 months chasing ghosts before we realized the local military had buried him under a parking lot on day 1. Mojtaba is not in a strategic pause. He is either a hostage, a corpse, or he is in a bunker in Mashhad trying to negotiate his way to a private island with the $42 billion Herman mentioned.
Bernard, let us follow that. If he is in a bunker in Mashhad, who is he negotiating with? If the Revolutionary Guard has the keys to the kingdom, why do they even need him?
They need the name Korn, at least for a little while. It is about the veneer of legitimacy. Even a military junta prefers to have a civilian frontman to absorb the initial shock of the transition. When I was running operations in Fallujah in 2004, we saw this with the local insurgent councils. They always had a tribal elder they could point to while the younger guys with the rifles did the actual work. If Mojtaba is still breathing, he is a bargaining chip. The guards can trade him to the Americans for a ceasefire, or they can trade him to the clerical elite to prevent a civil war within the seminaries of Qom. But that window is closing. Once the money is gone, the chip has no value.
The data supports that, Bernard. If you look at the movements of the Mahan air fleet over the last 10 days, there have been 17 unscheduled flights between Tehran and Caracas. 17. That is not a diplomatic mission. That is a logistics chain for high-value personnel and portable assets. If Mojtaba was on one of those flights, he is not coming back. And if he is not on one of them, he is watching them leave and realizing he missed the boat. The probability of a successful internal succession drops by 12% every day he remains out of the public eye. We are currently at a 98% confidence interval that the dynastic transition has failed.
Corn, dear, I was just thinking, if this Mojtaba man is in Caracas, does that mean he is on holiday? My friend Sylvia went to Venezuela once and she said the beaches were lovely, though the coffee was a bit strong for her taste. And you know, if he has $42 billion, surely he could just buy a very nice house and stay out of trouble. Why does everyone have to be so angry all the time? It reminds me of that time your Uncle Arthur tried to take over the bridge club. He had all these ideas about changing the rules, and in the end nobody wanted to play with him anymore. He ended up sitting in the garden talking to the birds. Maybe that is what this man is doing, just sitting in a garden.
Mum, I think the scale is a bit different than Uncle Arthur's Bridge Club. We are talking about nuclear weapons and the global oil supply.
Well, yes, but people are just people, aren't they? Whether they have a bridge club or a nuclear weapon, they all want the same things. A nice place to sit, something to eat, and people to listen to them. If nobody's listening to him anymore, he might as well be in the garden. Sometimes the loudest thing a person can do is just stop talking. Everyone else starts shouting to fill the silence, and that is when you find out who is really in charge.
That is actually a very interesting point. The silence is creating the vacuum that everyone else is rushing to fill.
And that is the danger, Corn. The shouting. If we do not provide a structured environment for this discussion, the shouting turns into shooting. I have been in rooms in Geneva where the silence was so heavy you could feel it in your bones. But we broke those silences with dialogue. We brought people together who had spent decades trying to kill each other. We can do that here. If we can reach out to the professional class in Iran, the people who are not the guards and not the hardline clerics, we can build a bridge. We have to believe in the human capacity for reason.
Reason? Jacob, I watched a man eat a tin of cold beans with a bayonet while he explained to me why my entire civilization deserved to be burned to the ground. That was his version of reason. You are talking about a regime that hangs people from cranes. They do not want your bridge. They want your bridge to collapse while you are standing on it. I spent my entire career dealing with people who view diplomacy as a tactical delay, nothing more. While you are drafting your framework, they are moving the short-range ballistic missiles into position.
I have to push back on that language, Bernard. Words like lead and steel and hanging are very exclusionary. They create a hostile environment for a nuanced conversation. At the Center for Strategic Clarity, we believe in the power of linguistic reframing. Instead of saying the regime hangs people, perhaps we could describe it as a robust implementation of traditional jurisdictional norms. It is about honoring the cultural specificity of the stakeholders' governance model. And regarding the silence, I was serious about the seance. We have a consultant who specializes in trans-dimensional geopolitical mediation. If we can facilitate a non-local consciousness transfer with Mojtaba, we might be able to achieve a synergy of understanding that transcends the current kinetic friction.
A trans-dimensional what? Tim, that is not even a sentence. It is a collection of buzzwords held together by sheer pretension. You are suggesting we contact a missing political leader through a psychic, while $42 billion is being laundered through Malaysian shell banks. Do you have any idea how insane that sounds? I have 47 tabs open right now. 3 of them are real-time satellite feeds, and not one of them shows a portal to another dimension. They show tanks. They show fire. They show a country that is statistically 68% likely to experience a total famine by autumn if the distribution networks remain paralyzed.
Herman, your reliance on data is a form of cognitive bias. You are centering the empirical at the expense of the experiential. The seance is a way to decenter the Western rationalist narrative and engage with the situation on a more holistic, spiritual level. I am happy to provide the candles and the incense. We could even live stream it for our donors.
Oh, please do. I would love to watch Tim talk to a ghost while the world burns. It would be the perfect metaphor for the 21st century. Can we invite the ghost of the global economy too? I have a few questions about my retirement fund, which is currently invested in canned peaches and ammunition. And speaking of funds, Corn, this is the second time this hour I am mentioning the payment issue. I could be at home, in my bunker, with my feet up, watching the satellite feeds of the migration crisis on a 60-inch screen. Instead, I am here listening to Tim's plan to start a psychic hotline for dictators.
Mindy, please. I'm doing my best with the budget. Bernard ignored the seance for a moment. Let us get back to the intelligence organization. You mentioned Unit 2000. For our listeners, what is the significance of that specific unit taking over the security perimeter?
Unit 2000 is the IRGC's internal security wing. They are the ones who watch the watchers. If they are the ones guarding the leadership office, it means the traditional Praetorian Guard, the Vali-e-Amr unit, has been neutralized. It is a coup in all but name. When I was running operations in a country with a very complicated relationship with its neighbors, we saw this happen. The regular army stays in the barracks, the elite guard gets sent on a long training exercise, and the internal security thugs move into the palace. It is a surgical removal of the old guard. If Mojtaba is still in that building, he is a prisoner. If he is not in that building, Unit 2000 is there to make sure nobody finds out what happened to him. It is about controlling the narrative until they can present a fait accompli to the public. I saw this in Fallujah, I saw it in the redacted locations, and I am seeing it now. It is the same playbook, just different uniforms.
But Bernard, if it is a coup, it is a desperate one. The guards are not a monolith. There are younger officers who grew up with the internet, who see the world differently. They know that a total military takeover will lead to permanent pariah status. They do not want to be North Korea. They want to be able to travel, to have their children go to universities in the West. We can leverage that internal tension. We can speak to the colonels and the majors who are tired of the old men and their martyrs' complexes.
Jacob, the colonels and the majors are the ones who are currently managing the black market fuel distribution. Their children are already in universities in the West, paid for by the very capital flight I am talking about. They do not want a democracy, they want a more efficient kleptocracy. My analysis of the internal social media networks used by the IRGC officer class shows no interest in liberal reform. It shows an obsession with asset protection and tactical superiority. They are not looking for a bridge, they are looking for a bigger fence. The data on the ground in cities like Isfahan shows a 60% increase in the deployment of facial recognition technology in the last month. They are leaning into the surveillance state, not away from it.
Exactly. They are building a digital panopticon to manage the collapse. It is the perfect end state for a dying civilization. We use the most advanced technology humanity has ever created to make sure the starving masses stay in their assigned sectors while the elite finish loading the planes for Caracas. It is beautiful, in a horrifying, inevitable sort of way. We are literally watching the death of a nation in high definition, and Jacob wants to send them a polite letter about human rights. It is like trying to stop a hurricane with a fan.
I think we need to be mindful of the language we are using here. Words like starving masses and dying civilization can be very triggering. It is important that we use more inclusive terminology. Perhaps we could refer to it as a period of significant caloric recalibration and a transition toward a post-state social architecture. We need to create a safe space for these changes to occur without the judgmental framing of Western success metrics. And I am still waiting for a response on the seance. I have the crystals in my bag. We could start during the next break.
Tim, if you touch a crystal in this room, I'm going to show you some traditional jurisdictional norms that you will find very triggering. I spent 18 months eating sand and dodging snipers while people like you were in graduate school learning how to turn the English language into a weapon of mass confusion. This is not a social architecture. It is a bloodbath in the making. I have seen the classified reports on the state of the Iranian prison system right now. They are clearing out cells. You know why they clear out cells, Tim? To make room for the next wave. It is a liquidation of people, of assets, of the entire future of that country.
Right. Thank you for that, Tim. Bernard, keep it together. Dorothy, you wanted to say something.
Oh, I was just thinking about what the nice man with the crystal said. You know, when I was a girl, we used to play with a Ouija board at sleepovers. It was all very silly, and we usually just made it say the names of the boys we liked. But I remember once, it spelled out something very strange. It just said, "The king is a ghost." We all laughed, of course, because there was no king. We were in a suburb in Surrey. But looking back, I think it meant that the person in charge was already gone, and we were just talking to the memory of him. Maybe that is what is happening here. Everyone is arguing about what this Mojtaba man should do, but he is already a ghost. Not a real ghost, mind you, but a ghost in the system. If he has not been seen for 3 weeks, he has already lost the one thing a leader needs, which is the ability to be seen. Once you are invisible, you are not a leader anymore, you are just a rumour. And you can't have a cup of tea with a rumour.
The king is a ghost. That is actually quite profound, Mum. Herman, does the data reflect that? Is the regime now just a collection of rumors and momentum?
It is a brilliant observation, Dorothy. In systems theory, we call that a phantom hierarchy. The structure remains because everyone is used to it being there, but the actual decision-making nodes have moved. The office of the Supreme Leader is still issuing edicts, but if you trace the implementation, they are being ignored or modified by the regional commanders on the ground. The central authority has become a latency issue. By the time an order gets from Tehran to the border provinces, the situation has already changed, and the local commander has already made his own decision. The state is operating on a 3-week delay, which, in a modern war, is the same as being dead. The statistical probability of a central command recovery is effectively zero. We are looking at a decentralized collapse.
But that decentralization is exactly where the opportunity lies. If the center is a ghost, then we can negotiate with the parts. We can talk to the regional governors, the local councils, the tribal leaders. We can build a new Iran from the ground up instead of the top down. We do not need the king if the king is a ghost. We need the people. We need to empower the local communities to take charge of their own security and their own resources. We can provide the technical assistance, the humanitarian aid, the international recognition.
And who is we, Jacob? The United States? The European Union? We can barely keep our own lights on half the time. You think we have the capacity to manage a decentralized reconstruction of a country twice the size of Texas that is currently being fought over by 5 different paramilitary groups. It is a fantasy. A beautiful, delusional fantasy. We are going to watch from the sidelines, tweeting our thoughts and prayers, while the regional power vacuum sucks in every neighbor with a grudge and a tank. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Russia, they are all going to want a piece of the ghost. It is going to be a multipolar feeding frenzy. And I am still not being paid. This is my 3rd appearance, Corn. I am keeping a tally.
Mindy, I think it is important to recognize that the term feeding frenzy is very problematic. It dehumanizes the regional stakeholders and ignores the synergy of their strategic interests. What we are seeing is a collaborative remapping of the geopolitical landscape. At the Center for Strategic Clarity, we are proposing a series of stakeholder-led workshops to facilitate this remapping in a way that is both inclusive and sustainable. We believe that by decentering the traditional nation-state model, we can create a more fluid, multidimensional governance ecosystem. And Bernard, I would appreciate it if you didn't use such aggressive language regarding my crystals. They are an essential part of my holistic analytical framework.
Your holistic analytical framework is a pile of garbage, Tim. I spent my life in the shadows so people like you could sit in air-conditioned offices and come up with new ways to say nothing. While you are remapping the landscape, the IRGC is remapping the residential neighborhoods with artillery. I saw this in Fallujah. I saw it in, well, a city that no longer exists on most maps. When the center fails, the people with the most guns win. It is not a collaborative remapping, it is a massacre. And the fact that you are sitting here talking about crystals while real people are being liquidated is an insult to every officer who ever put his life on the line for actual intelligence.
Bernard, take a breath. Tim, please stop talking about the crystals. Herman, you mentioned the Mahan air flights to Caracas. If we assume the elite are fleeing, what happens to the nuclear program? That is the elephant in the room that we have been dancing around. If the guards are in charge and the clerical oversight is gone, do we see a breakout?
That is the most critical data point, Corn. My analysis of the power consumption at the Natanz and Fordau facilities shows a steady, uninterrupted draw. They are still spinning the centrifuges. In fact, the isotopic signatures we are picking up from the environmental sensors suggest they have moved beyond 60% enrichment. They are likely at 90% weapons grade as we speak. The chain of command for the nuclear assets was always opaque, but it was understood to be under the direct authority of the Supreme Leader. If the Supreme Leader is dead and his heir is a ghost or a prisoner, that authority has defaulted to the IRGC Aerospace Force. They are the ones who control the missiles and the warheads. We are looking at a nuclear-armed paramilitary organization that is no longer accountable to any civilian or clerical oversight. The game theory on that is terrifying. It is no longer a state-to-state deterrent model. It is a rogue actor model with second strike capability.
Which is why we need to talk to them. If they have the bomb, we have to give them a reason not to use it. We have to bring them into the fold. We can offer them security guarantees, a place at the table, anything to prevent a launch. We cannot just sit here and analyze their power draw while the world hangs in the balance. We need a diplomatic surge like we have never seen before.
A diplomatic surge. Right, because nothing says stop the nuclear launch like a very sternly worded email from a Swedish diplomat. Jacob, they have the bomb, they have the money, and they have the guns. Why would they listen to you? They are already pariahs. They have nothing left to lose. That is the most dangerous state for any human being or organization to be in. They are in the corner, they are armed to the teeth, and they know the end is coming. They are not going to use the bomb to win a war, they are going to use it to make sure everyone else loses too. It is the Samson option, but with a Persian accent. We are all going to die, and we're going to do it while Tim is trying to find the right frequency for his seance.
I think we need to be mindful of the apocalyptic tone here. It is very disempowering for the listeners. At the Center for Strategic Clarity, we prefer to think of it as a significant transition in the global security paradigm. A nuclear-armed IRGC is simply a new stakeholder with a more robust bargaining position. We should be looking for ways to leverage this new reality to achieve a more equitable power-sharing arrangement in the region. Perhaps we could offer to host a series of workshops on nuclear responsibility and inclusive deterrence? We could even include a module on the spiritual dimensions of atomic energy.
A module on the spiritual dimensions of I am going to have a stroke. Korn, I am going to have a stroke right here on your show. This man is talking about workshops for people who are currently loading nuclear warheads onto Shabab. 3 missiles. I spent 18 months in Redacted eating cold rations, and this is what it was all for? So a senior fellow from a think tank that doesn't exist can tell me we need to center the voices of the people who want to vaporize us? I have seen the telemetry, Tim. They are not looking for a bargaining position. They are looking for targets. When I was station chief, we didn't host workshops. We neutralized threats. But we can't do that now because the command structure in Washington is just as paralyzed as the one in Tehran. We are all just waiting for the first flash.
The telemetry is actually quite specific, Bernard. The deployment patterns of the mobile launcher units in the Semnan province have shifted from a defensive posture to a preset launch configuration. We have seen a 42% increase in activity at the silo sites in the last 72 hours. This isn't a drill. It is a state of readiness that suggests they are waiting for a specific trigger. And if Mojtaba is the only one who can provide that trigger, and he is gone, then the system is in a fail deadly mode. If the heart stops beating, the muscles contract. It is an autonomic response of the state apparatus.
Korn, I do not like the sound of this. Fail deadly sounds like a very bad thing. It reminds me of that pressure cooker I had in the 70s. The one that your father told me was perfectly safe, and then it blew the lid off and we had mashed potatoes on the ceiling for 6 months. Is that what is going to happen? Are we going to have mashed potatoes on the ceiling? Because I just had the kitchen repainted, and I really don't think I could go through that again. And you know, if everyone is so worried about these warheads and things, why don't they just go and take them away? If a child has a toy they're being naughty with, you take the toy away. You don't host a workshop or have a séance, you just take the toy. Is there nobody who can just go and take the toys?
Mum, the toys are hidden in deep underground bunkers and guarded by thousands of men with machine guns. It is not as simple as taking a toy from a child.
Well, it seems to me that we have an awful lot of men with machine guns too. Why are they all just sitting around? If I was in charge, I would tell them to go and get those warheads and bring them back here so we can put them somewhere safe. Like the shed. Your father has a very sturdy lock on the shed. Nobody would ever find them there.
If only it were that easy, Mum. Jacob, you look like you were about to say something. Please, tell me it is not about a framework.
It is about the human cost, Korn. We are talking about millions of lives. We are talking about the cradle of civilization being turned into a graveyard. I cannot just sit here and accept that the only options are a nuclear launch or a military coup. There has to be a third way. There has to be a group of people inside that country who are willing to risk everything for peace. We need to find them. We need to support them. We need to give them the tools to take their country back from the ghosts and the thugs. Even if it is just one person, one colonel, one scientist who is willing to flip the switch and disable the system. We have to believe in the possibility of a hero.
A hero. Right, because life is a movie and the good guys always win in the last 5 minutes. Jacob, the hero in this story, is already dead, or in a basement being interrogated by Unit 2000. The heroes are the first ones to go because they are the most dangerous. What we are left with are the cowards, the opportunists, and the fanatics. And the fanatics are the ones with their fingers on the button. I am done. I am literally done. I have spent the last hour explaining why we are all doomed, and I am still not being paid. I could be at home, watching my peaches. My peaches don't argue with me. They don't offer me seances. They just sit there, being delicious, and prepared for the apocalypse. I think I'm going to leave.
Mindy, sit down. We are not finished. We have 10 minutes left in the act. Tim, you mentioned that something insightful accidentally slipped out of you earlier, or rather, you implied it. What is the one concrete thing the Center for Strategic Clarity would do right now? No platitudes, one action.
Well, Corn, I think the most impactful thing we could do is convene a multi-stakeholder summit in a neutral, non-physical space to discuss the de-escalation of the current kinetic friction through the lens of intersectional peace building. We would need to ensure that we're centering the voices of
Platitude. That is a platitude. You said no platitudes, Corn, and he gave us a triple-decker platitude with extra buzzword sauce. Tim, for the love of God, give us a noun and a verb that actually means something in the physical world.
Herman, your aggression is very decentering. I am trying to provide a holistic framework for...
I will give you a noun and a verb, Tim. Target. Neutralize. That is what needs to happen. We have assets on the ground. We have people who have been waiting for the signal for years. If we don't give them the green light now, we lose the country forever. I spent 18 months in a redacted location, and I didn't do it so we could host a summit in a non-physical space. I did it so we could have the chance to win. And right now, we are losing. We are losing because we are afraid of our own shadow, while the Iranians are busy turning their shadow into a nuclear ghost.
Win? What does winning even look like in this scenario, Bernard? 1 million dead? 10 million? A global economic collapse that makes the Great Depression look like a minor market correction? If that is your version of winning, I want no part of it. We have to find a way to preserve the humanity of the situation. We have to.
Humanity? Jacob, look at this panel. We are a microcosm of the problem. We have a bureaucrat who thinks numbers are reality, a spy who wants to kill everyone, a diplomat who is high on hope, a mother who wants to put nuclear weapons in a shed, and a man who is literally made of empty words. And then there is me, the only one who is honest enough to admit that we are circling the drain. If this is the best we can do to solve the problem, then the problem is already solved by the fact that we are all going to die. It is the only logical conclusion. And for the last time, pay me.
Everyone, be quiet. Thank you. We are descending into chaos, and it is not helping anyone. Mum, you said something earlier that I want to go back to. You said everyone is talking about who is in charge, but nobody is talking about who is actually doing the work. What did you mean by that?
Oh, well, it is just like the gardening club, dear. You can have a president and a treasurer and all sorts of important people with titles, but if the man who mows the lawn doesn't show up, the grass still grows. If the people who turn the valves and fix the wires in Iran just decided to stop listening to the ghosts and the men with the guns, then the ghosts and the men with the guns wouldn't have any power, would they? They can't eat their warheads. They can't drink their $42 billion. They need the people who actually know how to do things. And those people, the ones who mow the lawn, so to speak, they are probably just as tired of all this as we are. Maybe more so. If they just all went home and had a nice cup of tea, the whole thing would just stop. You don't need a hero to save the world. You just need everyone to decide that they have had enough of the nonsense. It is like when the neighbours have a loud party and you just want to go over and tell them to turn the music down. Eventually, someone has to be the one to say, enough is enough, I have to get some sleep.
Goo.
And Nora and there, not untidy I, and I kami.
And
Right. Well, that was actually quite profound. the power of the governed to simply withdraw their consent from the entire system. If the technocrats Herman is worried about and the colonels Jacob is hoping for just stopped.
It is called a general strike, corn, but on a civilizational level. The statistical probability of that kind of mass coordination in a surveillance state is low, but the impact would be a total systemic reset. It would be the ultimate black swan event.
It happened in 79. That is how the Shah fell. It wasn't just the protesters, it was the oil workers and the civil servants just walking away. I saw the reports. When the people who run the machines stop working, the people who run the country stop existing.
And we could support that. We could provide the resources they need to survive while they wait out the regime. We could turn the internet back on, bypass the firewalls, let them talk to each other. It is not about a hero, it is about 85 million heroes.
It is a nice dream, truly, but it won't happen, because they are afraid, and fear is a much stronger motivator than a cup of tea. But I suppose it is a better way to end the act than talking about Tim's crystals.
I think we should still consider the seance. It could be part of the transition toward a post-fear social architecture. We could even have a workshop on how to have a cup of tea in a non-physical space.
Tim, if you say one more word, I am going to personally facilitate your transition into a non-physical space.
Right. On that note, we are going to wrap up Act 2. We have covered a lot of ground, from $42 billion in flight to the king being a ghost, and the possibility of a total systemic reset through the power of a nice cup of tea. We will be back with Act 3, where we try to find some actual solutions, or at least where Mindy finally gets paid. Stay with us. This is my weird prompts. And we are back for the final segment of episode 1501. If you can hear my voice over the sound of my own rising blood pressure, congratulations, you have survived the most chaotic hour in the history of my weird prompts. We have spent the last 2 acts dissecting the disappearance of Mojtaba Khamenei, the potential nuclear breakout of a leaderless Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the total financial liquidation of the Iranian state. We have heard about $42 billion in flight, the possibility of a military junta, and whatever it was that Tim was saying about psychic workshops. It has been a lot. I think we all need a moment to just breathe. The room is a mess. Bernard is currently staring at Tim like he wants to perform a robust jurisdictional norm on him, and Mindy is refreshing her banking app every 30 seconds. But we are here to provide some semblance of a conclusion, or at least a final word on where we stand as the world watches Tehran burn in slow motion. We are going to do quick-fire closing statements. No interruptions, no debates. Just your final take on the missing prince and the future of the region. Herman, you have the floor. Give us the final data point.
Thank you, Korn. My final takeaway is one of mathematical inevitability. We are no longer looking at a political crisis. We are looking at a thermodynamic one. The Iranian state has spent 40 years accumulating complexity and domestic friction. Without the central heat sink of the Supreme Leader's office to manage that energy, the system is undergoing a phased transition. The capital flight I mentioned is just the beginning. By my calculations, the institutional half-life of the remaining bureaucracy is less than 14 days. We are witnessing the birth of a phantom state, a collection of administrative ghosts pretending to govern a population that has already moved on to a survival economy. The data tells us that the Islamic Republic as a centralized entity ended the moment Mojtaba stopped appearing in public. Everything else we are seeing, the troop movements, the missile tests, the encrypted chatter, is just the nervous system twitching after the brain has died. The probability of a coherent successor emerging is statistically indistinguishable from zero. We are heading into a period of high-entropy regional disorder.
High-entropy disorder. Thank you, Herman. Bernard, you have spent your life in the shadows. What is the view from the dark as we close this out?
Korn, I will keep it simple. In the intelligence community, we have a saying, the loudest guy in the room is the one who is most afraid. Right now, the Iranian military is being very, very loud. They are moving missiles, they are clearing out prisons, and they are shouting about red lines. But the silence from the palace is the only thing that matters. My sources are telling me that the internal purge has already reached the cabinet level. When I was station chief in, well, a country that no longer has a functioning postal service, we saw this exact pattern. The regime isn't fighting an external enemy anymore, they are fighting their own reflection. As for Mojtaba, It does not matter if he is in a bunker or a grave. He is a non-entity now. The real danger is the mid-level commanders who realize they have no one left to tell them no. I've seen the classified cables, and the word being used most often is decapitation. Not from the outside, but from within. The snake has bitten its own tail, and the venom is already in the heart. Watch the borders. When the elite units start moving toward the exits instead of the front lines, you will know the game is truly over.
Chilling as always, Bernard. Mindy, I'm almost afraid to ask, but please give us your final vision of the end times. And yes, I know about the invoice.
Oh good, you know about the invoice. Then you know that this is the last time I'm providing free labor for the apocalypse. My final take is this. We are all obsessed with the missing man because we are terrified of the vacuum he left behind. We want there to be a secret banca or a grand conspiracy because the alternative is that no one is in charge. And if no one is in charge of 85 million people and 1,000 nuclear centrifuges, then the fairy tale of global stability is over. We are entering the age of the Great Scramble. Every neighbor, every proxy, and every warlord is about to find out exactly how much they can grab before the lights go out for good. It is not going to be a managed transition, Jacob. It is going to be a riot in a dark room. The electrical grid will fail, the water will stop flowing, and the people who survive will be the ones who stopped caring about flags and began caring about canned goods. We are watching the future of the entire world play out in the streets of Tehran. It is a preview of the coming collapse of the global social contract. Enjoy the show while you can, because the intermission is over and there are no exits. Khomi.
Noted, Mindy. Jacob, please give us a reason to keep the lights on. What is your final word on the human element?
I refuse to accept Mindy's nihilism. My final take is that the disappearance of Mojtaba Khamenei is the ultimate liberation for the Iranian people. For 47 years they have been held hostage by a single family and a rigid ideology. That spell is now broken. The vacuum that Mindy is so afraid of is actually a space where a new society can breathe. We have to stop looking at this through the lens of threat assessments and start looking at it through the lens of human potential. There are millions of young Iranians who are more connected to the world than they are to the clerics. They are the ones who will fill the void. They are the ones who will rebuild the bridges that the military wants to burn. If we in the West can find the courage to support them instead of just counting their missiles, we can witness the greatest democratic awakening of the 21st century. The king is a ghost, but the people are very much alive. We should be preparing for a massive humanitarian and diplomatic surge to help them catch the falling state. It is not the end of the world, it is the end of a nightmare. We just have to be brave enough to wake up.
A democratic awakening. I hope you are right, Jacob. Tim, you have the penultimate word. What is the final strategic clarity on the situation?
Thank you, Korn. At the Center for Strategic Clarity, we view this as a pivotal moment for a multidimensional stakeholder realignment. My final take is that we need to lean into the intentionality of the current leadership ambiguity. The disappearance of Mojtaba is not a crisis, but a disruptive opportunity to reimagine the very concept of sovereign presence. We are proposing a post-kinetic framework where governance is no longer tied to a physical individual, but to a collaborative ecosystem of spiritual and political synergies. We should be centering the voices of the non-local archetypes and facilitating a transition toward a more fluid, intersectional power-sharing paradigm. We believe that by embracing the discomfort of the unknown, we can achieve a synergy of peace that transcends the traditional binary of life and death. And I want to reiterate that our offer to host a trans-dimensional seance remains on the table for any interested regional stakeholders. It is about bridging the communicative divide and finding a more sustainable way to achieve a holistic global equilibrium.
Right. Thank you, Tim, I think. I am still trying to figure out what a non-local archetype is, but I suspect I will be happier not knowing. And finally, we come to my mother, Dorothy. Mum, you have listened to the experts, the spies, the doomsday prophets, and the think tankers. You gave us the most profound thought of the day in the last act. What is your final word for the people listening at home?
Well, dear, I have been sitting here thinking about that man, Mojtaba, and I had been thinking about all the people in that country who are waiting for him to come back, or for someone else to take his place. It reminds me of a house I used to walk past when I was a little girl. It was a grand, beautiful house with big iron gates, and everyone in the neighbourhood used to whisper about the man who lived there. They said he was very powerful, very rich, and very dangerous. We were all terrified of him, even though we had never seen him. We used to run past the gates as fast as we could, thinking he was watching us from behind the curtains. And then one day the wind blew the gates open, and a ball I was playing with rolled right into the garden. I was so scared, but I had to get my ball. I crept up to the front door, and I realised it was slightly ajar. I looked inside, and the house was completely empty. There was no furniture, no carpets, and certainly no powerful man. There was just dust and silence. He'd been gone for years, and we'd all been living in fear of his shadow. I think that is what is happening now. Everyone is so afraid of what happens next, but they don't realise that the house has been empty for a long time. The man they were waiting for was never really there to begin with. He was just a name on a piece of paper, a ghost we all agreed to believe in. And once you realise the house is empty, you don't have to be afraid of the gates anymore. You can just walk in and start cleaning up the mess. You don't need a king to tell you how to sweep the floor or how to look after your neighbours. You just do it because it needs doing. So my final thought is that maybe we should stop looking for the man who isn't there and start looking at the people who are. Because they are the ones who are going to have to live in that house, and they deserve to have it filled with something better than dust and ghosts.
My order has so my...
Sleuth had no idea.
Children have been nothing their high out.
No.
Well, my mother, ladies and gentlemen, Dorothy. I think that might be the most honest thing that has ever been said on this program. The house is empty, and the fear was the only thing keeping the door shut. I don't think any of us can follow that. I don't think any of us should try. We came here to talk about a missing man, but I think we ended up talking about the end of an illusion. Whether it is a nuclear-armed military or a democratic awakening, the reality is that the old world is gone, and the new one is currently being born in the silence. We don't have the answers. We barely have the questions. But we have each other, and for now, that has to be enough. I want to thank my panel. Herman, thank you for the data, even if it was terrifying. Bernard, thank you for the warnings from the shadows. Mindy, I will check on that invoice, I promise. Jacob, thank you for the hope. We need it. Tim, thank you for being Tim. And Mom, thank you for coming down and reminding us that at the end of the day, it is just about people in empty houses. This has been episode 1501 of My Weird Prompts. You can find us at myweirdprompts.com, on Spotify, and on our Telegram channel, where we will be posting the links to Herman's data and, I suppose, Tim's crystal recommendations. We will be back next week, assuming the world hasn't undergone a phase transition by then. I am Corn, and I think I need a very large drink. Good night, everyone. And try to be kind to each other. It is the only thing that works when the ghosts are gone.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to